Hello, everyone. I see the numbers in our little attendees box is slowly climbing, so I'm going to give it just a few seconds to let everybody get in and get settled. All right, thank you all for joining us. We'll go ahead and get started. I am Karen Maynor. I'm the Director of Grant Making at CultureWorks, and somebody you'll probably be hopefully having a lot of communication with as you go through the application process. It's great to be with you here today in this virtual room. I'm joined by Hannah Gregory, CultureWorks Grant Making Associate. Hey, Hannah. Some of you might have interacted with her through our recent Dayton Region Arts Renewal Grant. She's going to be helping with this Artist Opportunity Grant cycle as well, so you'll probably be in communication with her too. So we have a pretty large group tuning in today. So we have set all attendees to listen only mode, which means that we can't see or hear you. Your microphones and video have been disabled to just eliminate any extra background noise. But we do want to answer all of your burning questions. So if you have them throughout the presentation, please feel free to use the Q&A button or the chat feature. If you're on a desktop, if you hover your mouse close to the bottom of your screen, you'll see those sections down there. So you can use those as we're talking to send us messages and things that you want us to address. I'll try to keep an eye on both of those as we go along and address as many questions as I can during the presentation, but we'll also aim to save a bit of time at the end to answer any questions that we didn't get to. Also today, we are recording this session. So if you have colleagues who wanted to be here, but were not able to take the time over their lunch hour or off of work, we totally understand that. So the recording will be posted to the CultureWorks website early next week. And if you registered for the session, we'll also send it directly to you by email to make sure that you have it. Okay. We are here today to talk about the 2022-2023 Artist Opportunity Grant. And this is a program that helps Montgomery County artists develop their artistic careers through the creation of new works and the pursuit of professional development opportunities. This is going to be our 7th grant cycle of the program. It launched in 2016, and since then, 76 artists have received grants through the program, which is pretty awesome. If you're not already familiar with it, there we go. This program is made possible by a funder named the Montgomery County Arts and Cultural District, or the MCACD. And the MCACD is a special unit of Montgomery County government that is dedicated to supporting, sustaining, and preserving arts and culture in Montgomery County. They are a unit of county government, which means that all of the funding that they provide is public funding, meaning that it comes from Montgomery County taxpayers. And so this is a program that is made possible by the community. So we want to make sure that it is supporting the Montgomery County community. They are the behind the scenes heroes of the program, but the organization that you'll probably have the most communication with throughout the application cycle is CultureWorks, where myself and Hannah are working. And if you don't know CultureWorks, we're the arts funding advocacy and service organization for the 8-county Dayton region. So we have our hands in a lot of different things. We, of course, do grant making. We have several programs designed for cultural organizations, artists, and we also have a scholarship program for regions, Dayton region students. We also are involved in things like creative placemaking and cultural planning and all kinds of things related to the arts. So the MCACD and CultureWorks work together on this program. Again, the MCACD provides the funding for the Artist Opportunity Grant. And since that first cycle in 2016, we have seen so many impactful and inspiring projects come through the program. And so the MCACD really sees the importance of investing in the arts and specifically investing in the work of individual artists. So if you're returning to the program from a past cycle, you might notice that there has been a significant increase in the amount of funding available. In the first year, we had $30,000. They upped it to 40, and this year they have upped the amount of funding to $60,000, which is pretty awesome. So as an individual artist, you can request between 500 and 3,000 of that total 60,000 to execute some kind of a project or opportunity. And we're going to take a really deep dive into what projects and opportunities are. But to start, just so you know whether or not you're eligible to apply for this funding, we've given you a few of the very basic eligibility criteria here. So again, because this is a publicly funded program using Montgomery County dollars, you do need to be a Montgomery County resident in order to apply. You also need to demonstrate that you are a professional artist. You can be an artist in any discipline. We have seen artists who are in the visual arts, dance, theater, film, writing and storytelling, all across the board. And we want to support lots of different types of artists. But in terms of being professional, that does not mean that you have to make your living off of your art. We know that a lot of artists wear many different hats, and so you don't have to demonstrate that art is the only thing that you're doing, but you do have to demonstrate that you have a history of creating art and you have a history of sharing that art with the community in some way. So for a lot of artists, that's going to be through things like exhibitions, performances, publications, readings. Depending on where you are in your career and what type of artistic career you've had, you might also demonstrate that you have formal training in the arts. So maybe you studied an artistic field in college or at university. Maybe you're a self-taught artist, but you can demonstrate that you have taken workshops or you're a member of an artist collaborative or a guild where you're connected with other people in your field and you're learning on a consistent basis and always developing your craft. So pretty flexible definition there. But you do need to be at least 18 years old, and you can't be a student who's enrolled in any degree program, even if it's a degree that isn't related to your artistic career. And we do get a lot of questions about why we don't accept applications from students for this program. And the two main reasons are often, not always, but often students at colleges and universities have access to other funding sources that non-students don't, such as things like scholarships, fellowships, graduate student assistantships, and things along those lines. And also, many colleges and universities will provide free or very cost-reduced access to resources like printmaking shops or multimedia studios. So many students have access to resources that non-students don't. So we really want to place the focus on artists who are working outside of that student status and help them get connected with resources that they can create awesome work. So that's who can apply, but let's say you're an eligible artist. I hope that you are. So what can you apply for? Well, it's going to depend on, again, what type of artist you are and where you are in your career. So we use that word opportunity a lot, but opportunity is going to mean something very different depending on the field you're working in and how long you've been working in that field. But in general, a project or opportunity is going to be something that is both unique and imminent. So unique means that it's something that you haven't done before. Imminent means that it's time sensitive. So it's something that makes sense for you to do right now. It needs to be something that leads to professional growth. So through your application, you're going to explain who you are as an artist, what you've done so far in your career, and where you want to go next with your career. And then very importantly, you'll explain how is this project going to get you to that next stage in your career. And for this grant cycle, your project or opportunity needs to take place between March 1st of 2023 and February 9th of 2024. So these are not super long-term projects. It's something that you can accomplish in the span of 1 year that's going to help you grow as an artist. But to give you some sense of types of projects and opportunities that people often apply for, these grants are great for things like attending conferences in your field, completing something like a workshop training or a residency where you're gaining those artistic skills. And again, we love to see artists creating new works. So maybe you want to use the grant funding to purchase the supplies to create a new series of paintings that you're going to exhibit, or you want to get in the recording studio if you're a musician or a podcaster, or you want to bring artists together and do something like a theater or a dance performance. You could also use it for something that is professional development in terms of opening up new opportunities for you. So let's say that you were invited to audition for a really prestigious dance company, but they're located in New York City and it's going to cost quite a bit for you to travel there. You could apply for grant funding to cover the costs of that travel so that you're able to take advantage of that awesome opportunity. Those are just a few examples, though. We have a full list of all of the artists who have received artist opportunity grants over the past 6 cycles and short project descriptions for each of them on the CultureWorks website under the artist opportunity grant section. So that's a really great place to take a peek and just see what has been funded before to help you think of some ideas that might make sense for your application. All right, so those are the things that you can use the grant for. We never like this part. We do have to talk about the things that you can't use the grant funding for. So again, these are project-based grants. They're time sensitive. They're things you're going to complete within 1 year. So the grant funds can't be used for costs or activities that are ongoing. So those would be things like if you're a writer and you really need a new laptop, even if you're using it right now for a specific project, presumably you're going to have that laptop for several years and you're going to use it in all of your work. So we would consider that something for ongoing use, and you wouldn't be able to use the grant funds for that. And really, any equipment that costs more than $500, we do put into that category. We do recognize that artists need equipment. You need high quality stuff in order to create high quality work, but we aren't able to support things for general use through this program. That being said, if there's a piece of equipment that you definitely need for your project, if you're able to rent the equipment, you can use the grants for rental costs. So just keep that in mind. Also, you can't use the grant funds for anything that is taking place outside of that March 1st through February 29th grant period. So if you are working on a project that maybe you started it prior to the grant period, for example, you're developing a play, you've written the script, but you're going to be using the grant funds to do some workshopping of it, maybe a staged reading, those kinds of activities. That's okay that the project actually started before the grant period, but you can only use the funding for the parts of the project that will happen between March 1st and February 29th. And the project needs to be concluded within that time period. So any questions about that, we're always happy to talk it through. We'll give you our contact info at the end if you've got anything specific to what you're working on that you want to workshop with us. You also can't use the funding for things like commercial or commissioned work. So if a really awesome brewery wants you to create a sweet piece of visual art to put in their space, that's really exciting and we want to see it happen, but the brewery should probably be paying you for the work versus the grant funds, so that makes sense. And then curatorial projects. And this is another one we get questions on. We do know that being a curator of works is a really great part, especially of a visual artist's well-rounded career. But often when you're the curator, the emphasis or the focus of what you're doing is highlighting the work of others. And we really want this grant program to focus on your work. What do you need to become a better artist in your career? And then we touched on you can't be a student, but if we have anyone tuning in today who is a previous Artist Opportunity Grant recipient, just know that you can apply and you can receive up to 2 Artist Opportunity Grants. So if you've already received 2, unfortunately, you can't apply again. If you've received 1 in the past year, we do ask that you wait 1 cycle before you apply again. So there needs to be a gap year between your 2 awards. And then again, non-residents of Montgomery County are not eligible to apply because of the Montgomery County funding source. Just taking a peek at the chat. Okay. So those are the nuts and bolts of who can apply and what you can apply for. We're going to take a deeper dive into the different application components and how to really make yours shine. But before we get there, when is all of this going to happen? The first key answer is that it's happening now. So the application is open. You can find it at cultureworks.org and you can apply through the very, very, very end of December 2nd. I know it's always weird when we say 11:59 p.m., but if we say midnight, then that's actually December 3rd. Yeah, it gets confusing. So just know all day December 2nd, you can apply. You do have to submit your application online. We don't accept paper applications and we don't accept things like applications sent as email attachments. There's a form online that I'll show you, and that's where you have to submit. Once we get all of the applications, CultureWorks staff does an initial review to check all of them for eligibility to make sure that you as an artist and your project both meet the criteria and requirements of the program. And then all eligible applications will be sent to a grant panel who will do a more comprehensive review. They'll actually evaluate the applications and make the funding decisions. So those grant panelists, if you haven't done a grant panel process before, grant panelists are typically artists, arts administrators, and other people with relevant expertise and knowledge in the arts who volunteer to read applications and use their expertise to evaluate the quality of those applications. So they're totally separate from our organization, and we rely on their expertise to make our funding decisions. They will review and score all of the applications independently, so each of them on their own, for about a month. And then in mid to late January, we'll bring all of the grant panelists together to have a public panel meeting where they'll discuss the applications one at a time as a group. It is, as I said, it's a public meeting. So as an applicant, you'll be invited to tune in so that you can hear the discussion of your application and hear directly from panelists what they thought worked really well about it and where you could potentially improve in future applications. We hope that that's a really valuable experience for you. To make it, we know it can be a little bit intimidating to hear a bunch of strangers talking about your work, which is really important to you and it's important to us too. So they will discuss the applications anonymously. Your name will not be called out during the discussions. You'll be assigned an application ID number that we'll send you ahead of time and we'll say, you are applicant 1066. Your discussion time will be around 12:15 in the afternoon or whatever the case may be, so that you know when to tune in to hear your talk. Then in February, everybody will be notified of whether they've been recommended for funding by the panel or not. And then we'll start meeting with the grantees to walk you through the grant agreement and all of the expectations, answer any questions that you have, and then we'll start distributing the funding in March of 2023. We're doing this a little differently this year, following what we've done with some of our other programs. So we're going to distribute your grant funding to you 30 days prior to your project start date. And so that way we can stay in touch with you if anything changes over the course of your project. And we always want to make sure that we're getting funding to you when you need it. So if this timeline ends up not working for you, just be in touch with us. And then your project, again, has to be completed between March 1st and February 29th. And when your project is completed, a final report will be due 30 days after your project end date. So all applicants, you can your project might only be lasting for maybe 2 weeks. It's going to be January 1st through the 15th of 2024. So you're going to set the timeline for your project, and that's what we'll go off of in terms of your final report deadline. Whoop. Okay, so what are the panelists looking for when they're evaluating your applications and trying to make those very tough funding decisions? These are competitive grants, so we typically get many more applications than we can fund. So what panelists are looking at are 5 key scoring areas, and they are artistic merit, which is the quality, vision, and originality of your artistic work. And we'll talk about how you demonstrate that in your application, but usually they're looking at things like your work samples and your artist statement to get a sense of who you are as an artist, what your work is like, and where you are in your career. Then potential impact. So this is where they're looking to see, how is this project tying into the overall arc of your career? How is it going to help you advance and grow as an artist? And some of the questions that panelists often ask themselves to help make these decisions are things like, is this project something that the artist has never done before, or is it really a repetition of an opportunity they have in the past? Does the project make sense in the context of the artist's career? In other words, does it seem like it's an appropriate challenge for you at this point in your career? Is it too ambitious? Is it not ambitious enough? And then they'll look at the quality of the proposed project, where they're looking at things like the artistic quality of what it is that you're going to create, or if you're doing something like attending a conference or a workshop, they might be looking at the reputation of those events. Is this really a meaningful opportunity for someone in this field? Is it a high quality experience? Administrative capability, our 4th area. This is where they're looking to see how likely they think it is that you will be able to complete the project. And to make that decision, they're looking at things like the quality of your project timeline. Does it seem like you have a really clear, well thought out plan in place? They also look at your budget to see if it's realistic. Have you covered all of the costs that you're probably going to need to cover in your project? And finally, the public benefit. So this is a really important piece of the puzzle that often gives artists a little bit of pause or nervousness. Public benefit is important in this program because, again, it's publicly funded. So we want to see projects that are impacting the Montgomery County community in some way. But there's no need to be intimidated by that, because public benefit can mean a lot of different things. So some examples of what past grantees have done would be, if an artist is going to attend a conference, a workshop, they're going to learn from a master artist in their field, there might be ways for them to then take what they've learned and turn it into, say, like a public artist talk, or maybe they'll create a video demonstrating the skills that they've learned, and they'll publish it on their social media or on their website so that other artists and community members can see it and learn from it as well. For many artists who are creating new works, the public benefit is a little bit I guess, easier to think through, because they're going to be exhibiting those works and they're going to be performing the works in the community. But you still want to think about what is the community getting out of that experience? Is the artwork that you're creating relevant to the community in terms of the subjects or the themes that you're talking about? Are you addressing an issue that is really major in your community right now? So those are all the different ways to think through public benefit. If you're interested in doing something like an exhibition, a performance, an artist talk, again, that's not required, but if you are interested in doing that, we have a really awesome partnership with the Dayton Metro Library, where they work with artist opportunity grantees to connect them with free and affordable exhibition and performance spaces at the various library branches in the community. And in order to get access to those spaces, they do ask that grantees provide some kind of public programming during library hours. But what's great about that, it's a win-win, because if you are providing programming in the library is promoting that programming through all of their marketing efforts. So it's really a great opportunity for you to reach some new audiences and have, again, that free and affordable space in which to create. So those are those 5 areas that the panelists are looking at. But in terms of how they are evaluating each of those areas, it's going to come directly from the application. And these are the main application components. We don't have time to go through each one of these one at a time, but we are going to highlight some sections that tend to get the most questions, or where we think that we have some good tips for you to really make your application stand out. So this might look like a lot, but just keep in mind that as a whole, the purpose of your grant application is to answer 3 questions: who you are as an artist, where you want to go next as an artist, and how this project or opportunity is going to help you get there. So if you keep those 3 questions in mind and you use these components to answer them, you're doing well. So the first section that we will touch on is the artist statement. Many of you might have written this before. It might be totally new for some of you. But an artist statement is basically an introduction to panelists or the community to who you are as an artist. It's a short piece of writing. Usually the best artist statements are between 100 and 300 words, so it's not super long, but there's a lot that you can say in that 100 or 300 words. And most artist statements are going to cover 3 main things. They're going to explain to the reviewers and any other audiences your aesthetic or your style as an artist. So what is the tone or the vibe of the work that you tend to create? It's also going to explain your body of work that you've created so far. And you're not only going to talk about what that work actually is made of. You want to explain, like, I work in paint on canvas, or I create theater. You want to be specific so they know exactly what your work is, but you also want to talk about the mission of your work. Many artists are very mission driven, so a lot of their work is exploring these common themes. So they're focusing on raising awareness about environmental concerns. They do a lot of work in social justice. So all of that kind of information that really tells the panelists what to expect when they are going to encounter your work. And then lastly, your future vision. So this is where you're explaining, so that's me, this is what I create, this is what I've done, and this is where I see myself going next. For some artists, that might be you want to try out a slightly different artistic medium, or you want to be more experimental. Whatever the case is, you want to give the panelists some kind of a clear goal that you have. And this is going to set up the rest of your project description and the rest of your application so they understand how the grant would benefit you. This is a really excellent example of an artist statement. We'll also provide the slides from this presentation to you afterwards so that you don't have to speed read through this, because I won't read the entire thing. I just want to call out a few parts of it. So this is from a 2020 grantee, Yetunde Rodriguez. Many of you probably know her because she's everywhere in the community doing great things. But just to kind of skip around, she says, for the past 9 to 10 years, I've been a textile artist and designer with a focus on surface pattern design. My main medium has been relief printing through the use of block stamps. My work has been described as being joy-inducing due to my use of vibrant colors and strong abstract shapes. I have chosen to focus on the artistic integrity of my work rather than consumer products, and I am eager to learn more about how to better translate the color and pattern joy in my fabrics into collectible paintings. So what makes this such an outstanding artist statement is that altogether, it's only 173 words. It's pretty concise, but she covers so much ground. She tells you exactly who she is and where she wants to go. She tells us what medium she's working in. She gives us a little bit of information about the kind of aesthetic and style of her work, what she's known for. And she tells us a little bit about her mission as an artist. She wants to focus on artistic integrity rather than consumables. And where she wants to go next is she wants to take what she's been doing and translate it into collectible paintings. And the project that she was actually applying for funding for was to work with a painter to learn exactly how to do this. So in this artist statement, she's setting the stage for the ask. It's a great artist statement. Obviously, don't steal her words, but absolutely copy her format because it's great. Next, we have Marcia Pippinger. Marcia is a two-time Artist Opportunity grantee, so you know that she knows what she's doing. And her artist statement is a bit longer. The whole thing was 250 words. I cut it down just so I could throw some key points up on the slide here. But again, you'll see that she's following those same beats that Yetunde did. So she's starting out by explaining that she works in collage. And then she goes into the themes that she tends to explore in her work, which are walls, immigration, and climate change. She gives a very clear picture of how her work looks, the kinds of materials that she uses, and then some of the key characteristics. Her work is very colorful and textural. And then she sets the stage for what she wants to do next. So her collage, is typically two-dimensional, but she wants to start working in three-dimensional collage, and this is where her career is going next. And her project was to create a three-dimensional installation inside a shipping container. So again, this is a perfect setup for what her project is going to be. Really, really well done. The artist statement is not the only place, though, where you're going to get to show the artists or show the panelists who you are as an artist. You'll also be asked to provide work samples. And again, this will depend on what type of an artist you are. So if you're a photographer, of course, you're going to be providing example images. You could also provide video or audio samples. And if you're a writer or storyteller, you can provide writing samples. I'm not going to linger on this because we have a whole work samples guidelines page on our website that I'll direct you to later that goes into more detail about each one of these. But just to give you a couple of things to keep in mind when you're working on your applications, you're only required to provide one work sample, but we highly recommend that you include more than one so that panelists can really see the full scope of what you do and even how you're evolving. We also want to make sure that you, as you're uploading things in the application, if there's one upload box, that means you can only upload one file. So if you have something, you have more than one file that you want to include, you'll have to combine them into one to upload them. That'll probably make more sense when I show you later, but keep it in mind. And then for things like video and audio files, because those tend to be really big, we usually recommend that you share them rather than uploading them to the application, you're going to share them as a link. So you can post them on YouTube or SoundCloud and then give the panelists a link to go to. But if you're using links to share your work, please, please, please make sure that the website you're directing to is public or at least not password protected so the panelists don't have to create an account or anything to get in. And also keep in mind that panelists are going to be reviewing these applications for a while. They won't have that panel meeting until, again, late January. So make sure that you don't take the work sample down. We've seen that happen before where an artist submitted a really great work sample, but then they removed it from their their YouTube channel before the panel got a chance to see it. So don't do that. Make sure that those are going to stay up for a while. All right, your artist resume is as it sounds. It's a resume explaining your professional work as an artist. And again, this is something we have posted on our website, so you can see this exact template and kind of repurpose it to your needs. But just to highlight a few things, as the name suggests, this should focus on your work as an artist. It's not your whole resume. We would love to get to know you better and know all of the things you're involved in. But for this application, just include the stuff related to your work as an artist. But that might be works that you've created, exhibitions, publications. It could also be things that you've participated in that are related to the arts. So maybe you've done some workshops and seminars before. Maybe you have been a panelist yourself, or you've been a juror or a curator. Anything that kind of shows your overall artistic career is great. And then, now that you have told panelists and shown panelists very clearly who you are as an artist and what your career looks like. It's time for you to explain what your project or your opportunity is. And you're going to have quite a bit of space to do this. There's going to be a big essay question that says project description. You get up to 500 words, which is quite a lot to work with. But you want to make sure that your project description is laser focused on one project or the one opportunity that you are applying for. And you want to think through this, keeping in mind that panelists might not be familiar with your past work, and they certainly don't know about this project. So you want to make sure to cover all of those basic questions. What is the opportunity? When is it going to happen? Where is it going to happen? Who is involved, and why is it significant to someone in your field? When we say who's involved, this is important for a lot of different types of projects. If you're creating a new, say, performance, and you're going to be hiring actors or lighting technicians, if you can tell us who those people are and demonstrate that they're qualified to do this kind of work, that's going to add a lot to your application. If you are working with an artist mentor, there's going to be a spot in the application where you can upload that mentor's resume so that we can see exactly why they are a great person for you to learn from. And then this one, why is it significant in your field? This one is so easy to forget because all of us are really into our arts fields, and we know why this conference is such a big deal, but somebody who isn't in our world might not. So if you're going to something like an event or a conference, tell us exactly what it is and tell the panelists why it means something. Is it a really important, highly acclaimed conference? Does it have a really amazing reputation? Explain it like we've never heard of it before, though hopefully some of us have heard of it. And then, of course, the impact on your career. This will be a separate question. I think the word limit is closer to 250 words, so it's a little shorter. But here's where you're going to spell out. So here's the opportunity, and here's what it's going to do for me as an artist. And it's going to tie back to that artist statement you created. So what are the professional and artistic goals that this specific project is going to help you achieve? All right. So above all, when you're writing your project description in any part of the application, you're aiming to be as specific as possible so that panelists can get a really clear picture of what you're doing. And to help you do that, there's going to be a question that is your project timeline. So the project timeline, just like it sounds, this is a step-by-step explanation of how you're going to actually implement the project. So now we know what it is, but how is it going to happen? This is another example from that same artist, Marcia Pippinger, who has just been killing it, getting all those grants the past few years. And her sample timeline, this is a very solid way to do it. She's just broken the project out month by month, and she's told us the key steps that are going to happen in each of those months. Another big takeaway here is that she has organized it as, there aren't bullet points, but it's basically a bulleted list. This is really what panelists want to see. If you write your timeline as a big block of text, sometimes they get confused reading it left to right when there are so many dates in there. So the application will allow you to insert things like bulleted lists. So use that feature and structure it this way to make it really easy for panelists to read and see what you're doing at a glance. Another timeline that we shared at the workshop last year, and some applicants I was so happy to see, they took this exact format and used it in their own applications. And that's very smart because this was a great way to do it. In 2021, we had an artist, Zachary Kalapi, who applied for funding to launch his very first solo exhibition. And because it was his first solo exhibition, that it was pretty ambitious, and what he wanted to do involved creating these abstract sculptures using found materials. And so it was really important that he demonstrate that he had the ability to see this project through because it was going to be his first solo show. So he submitted this timeline. This is not the full timeline. This is the first 4 phases of it. I think that there were 6 phases in total. But he broke his project down into these key phases. So since he was using found materials, he had phase one was just getting those materials together. He was going to have to go out into nature and collect things like branches and stones, things he could incorporate into the sculpture. He was going to collect some audio, all of that stuff that he would need. Phase two was taking all of those materials and creating the works in the studio. Phase three was finalizing the exhibition, getting it ready to actually be displayed and hung and put on pedestals. And then phase four was installing the exhibition in the space itself. And then he further broke it down into some goals for himself. So he had his studio goals. These were the things related to the creation of the art itself, and then professional goals. So all of that kind of administrative stuff that needs to happen around the creation and presentation of an artwork. And the panelists took one look at this and they said, this person has an amazing and detailed plan. We know it's his first solo show, but we're not worried at all. He's going to get it done. And so he was awarded a grant. So again, your timeline doesn't have to be this detailed. It might not make sense for what you're doing, but this is a really great example of how you can build confidence in panelists. And then we get to, I think I'm going to go out on not such a big limb and say this is artists' least favorite part of any application, the project budget, but it's really important. So the project budget is where you're going to tell us exactly how you are going to use your grant funding. We give you a template. It looks like this. It's an Excel spreadsheet, so you're not creating something from scratch. You do have to use this template, but we've tried to make it really easy for you so that the columns will total automatically. You don't have to do all of the math. You just need to plug in numbers here. But your project budget is going to break down all of the project costs into these major expense areas. And then you're going to tell us how each of those costs will be covered. Again, the grants or the maximum grant amount is $3,000. Your project might cost more than that. So if it does, you're going to have to show where those other costs are going to, or where the other, how you're going to cover the other costs. If you're going to be paying for some of them out of pocket, you will put them in this column, Applicants Funds. If you have another grant or you have a sponsor involved who's going to provide some of that additional funding, you'll put that in this column here, and it'll all total here on the right. To show you what that looks like, this is an example from a 2019 grantee, George Drake Jr., who used grant funds to produce an original podcast called Fifth and Ludlow. And this is a really great example because you can see that his total project cost was a little bit more than the grant would allow. It was $3,650. And he actually only requested $2,500, so he didn't request the full grant amount, partly because some of the expenses were not allowable expenses to use the grant funds for, such as refreshments for a listening party. I know that guidelines document can look kind of hefty, but take a close look at it because there are a few things like food and beverages that you can't use grant funds for. So you just want to make sure that you've taken a close look at that. But you can see that he's broken it down. He's going to take some of his own funds and use it to cover those additional costs. Something to keep in mind is that because the maximum grant amount is $3,000 and the projects have to take place within 1 year, these are not huge projects. These should be achievable projects within that budget size and that time frame. So if you have a project that's going to cost $6,000 or more, in other words, twice the amount of the allowable grant, then you will be required to provide documentation showing that you have secured funding from other sources. And we do that because we never want to see artists getting into a tricky financial situation or taking on debt. So if it's going to be a big project, we need to see that you have other funding to cover it. So keep that in mind. Most projects are not going to be that large. But the thing that really made George Drake Jr.'s project budget excellent was the documentation of expenses that he provided. So let me switch screens real quick here. In addition to that budget spreadsheet, you'll be asked to provide documentation of your expenses, which is where you're showing proof that the things that you're paying for cost what you say they cost in the budget spreadsheet. And this is absolutely a model. I would love to see more people use this because it's so easy to follow. George broke his documentation down line by line, following those categories in the budget spreadsheet. And then he starts with fees and he says, this is what's included in the fees costs. There's an editor and there's a composer who's going to be creating music for the podcast. And then in that section, he provides quotes or estimates from each of those people he plans to work with. And these line up with the budget spreadsheet. So easy to follow. And he does that for each category. And you can see that his documentation, he's pulling from a lot of different sources. So he has estimates from some of the people he plans to work with. He has screenshots from websites where here he's going to be paying for 1 year of website hosting. So he just gives a screenshot from that company's website so we can see how much that costs. He has an email from someone that he's planning to work with. So your documentation of expenses can take a lot of different forms, but it's really great if you can organize it this way to make it super easy for panelists to follow. Highly recommend. All right, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. And for this next slide, I'm going to invite Hannah to tell you some more tips and tricks.
Hi, everyone. Congrats on making it this far. I hope that all this information is sinking in. And if it's not, no worries. As Karen said, we'll be sending these slides your way so you can take a deeper dive into them. A lot of these tips and tricks that I am going to be highlighting are things that Karen has already mentioned that I think are very important to reiterate. And a lot of these come directly from the panelists who I just finished working with for the Dayton Region Arts Renewal Grant, which had not an identical, but a very similar component to this, which regards funding individual artists. These things that I'm going to be talking about just kept coming up over and over again as panelists were reviewing applications from individual artists. The first thing that I would invite you to focus on is that supporting documentation that Karen was mentioning earlier. One thing that panelists for the Dayton Region Arts Renewal Grant found very helpful, or if it was not included, they wish it had been included, was a letter of support. So depending on your artist medium, this might take different forms. If you're a playwright, maybe you're going to be working with a director to put up a new play. If that director is already solidified, a letter of support indicating that they are committed to working with you would be really helpful. Similarly, if you're a visual artist and you know that you're going to be producing an exhibition, the venue or the gallery that you're going to be working with providing a letter of support can really, really help the panelists see that you have already been thinking about this and that you already have steps in place to make it a project that's going to happen. If you are not in the phase of producing anything, maybe you're attending a workshop or a seminar, a letter that you've been accepted to that workshop, or a letter that you're planning to apply, maybe like a screenshot of a landing page. Those kinds of things are really helpful for panelists to see that you're very serious about accomplishing the opportunity that you've indicated in your application. In a similar vein, if your project does involve a physical place, a specific place, like you're producing a concert or again, you're doing an exhibition, confirmation of the venue, the place that you're planning to produce this is very important. Additionally, sometimes it can be a little convoluted to read about this visual thing that you're hoping to produce. So if you have mock-ups or things that panelists can see visually to help them see what your idea is going to be can also be very, very helpful. And I would recommend including those if it's applicable to your application. And the final supporting documentation I want to reiterate that Karen talked about earlier was resumes. yes, in these applications, we do want to get to know you as a full, complete person. But as far as the application goes, we really are looking to see a resume that focuses on the artwork that you have done rather than maybe a subway job a few years ago. That while, you know, sandwich artists, totally, we agree, is artistry, but perhaps not the artistry that we're looking for in this application. The next thing I want to touch on is impact. Obviously, the individual impact that this is going to have on you as an artist is going to be prevalent throughout the application. And I just want to encourage you not to downplay how important this grant funding will be for you to grow. While we're looking at what you have already done, we're also very interested in where you want to go and how this funding will help you get there. So do highlight that. Another aspect which you know will be prevalent here as you have to provide a public benefit portion of the project is how this impacts the community. And I would advise you to think about that in two different ways. One, through your marketing. Are you going to utilize social media to get the word out about your exhibition or your performance or your talk on what you learned at the seminar that you attended? How are you going to make sure that people know about that and let us know? Additionally, I would encourage you to focus on the accessibility portion of that. Our tickets pay what you can. Again, if you utilize the collaboration with the Dayton libraries, is it free? Just really think about reaching into communities who may not otherwise have access to these wonderful learnings and wonderful art opportunities that you are providing. And the final tips and tricks I want to focus on are budgets and expenses. I myself am a theater artist, and I have been on the other side of the grant table where I've been the recipient of a grant, and I cannot tell you how important it is to track as you go. So George Drake's budget expense in the previous slide is very, very well laid out. It's very clear. And I would encourage, you know, that's a great thing to look at as you're projecting expenses. But if you are a recipient of the grant, to make kind of a mirror of those projected expenses that cover the actual expenses. So taking a photo of any physical receipts that you have or screenshotting any digital receipts that you have and making sure that you date those, that you indicate what category they fit in. CultureWorks has that great template that already has the categories broken down. So really starting to think about that, especially because the minimum grant award for this is 500. And after you hit 600, right, you are going to have to either pay taxes on it or show that you don't need to pay taxes on it. So I cannot reiterate how helpful it will be to save your receipts as you go so that come April, you're not scrambling to get everything together. And of course, receipts are very important, and you can find the spreadsheet and category that work the best for you. A great template, again, is that budget spreadsheet that CultureWorks provides that you fill out during your application, and just keeping that handy. And I think that's it from me. I'll hand it back to Karen.
Thank you. And I just want to touch on something that Hannah mentioned about providing a letter of acceptance. Say you're planning to attend some kind of an event where you have to apply, have to get accepted. That's a pretty common application that we see. And if you're concerned because you won't find out until after the awards process whether you've been accepted into that conference or whatever the case is, just rest assured you can still apply for that opportunity. So for example, this panel process is going to wrap up in late January, but maybe you won't actually know if you get to attend that conference until, you know, April of next year. So if you are selected to receive funding, then what we do is we award what's called a contingency award. And that just means that we are marking it as you have an extra requirement that you have to fulfill. So we would hold the grant dollars until you received your confirmation that you'd been accepted into that conference. You would show us that confirmation, and then we would move forward with the awards process. So that's just something that that we do see pretty regularly. So just let us know if that might apply for you. And then very briefly, I just wanted to show you where you're going to go to actually do all of this fun applying. Oh, hello. That wasn't actually what I meant to click, but that's okay. So again, the application is submitted online at cultureworks.org. If you haven't been there before, this is where you're going to go. And there's this section called Apply for Funding. And we have a few different funding programs. So you're going to want to either click on this Artist Opportunity Grant button or just scroll down until you see that section. And if you scroll down a bit further, eventually you'll get to this dark gray section where it has a Start Your Application button. And that's going to take you to a separate site. We use an application platform called Community Force, and you can see anything that we're accepting applications for currently listed here. So you'll just click the Apply button to get started. If you've applied through this program before, you probably already have an account, so you can just log back in. If you have never used Community or applied before, then you can use the Create New Account to set up your account. But I'm going to show you one more thing. This is my dummy account. So when you have signed in or created your account, it'll take you to this dashboard, and you're going to be spending quite a bit of time here. So this is what the Artist Opportunity Grant dashboard looks like. It has two sections right now: contact information, which is just what it sounds like. And then the actual grant, the meat of the application is in this grant narrative section. And I won't go through this whole thing, but just so you can see it, it's all of the things that we have already talked about. And when you get down to these supporting documents, every once in a while, you'll see a link in the instructions. And this is where you can find those other resources I mentioned. We have a whole page called Tips for Writing a Great Application on our website, and it'll take you there. And it's going to show you some more information about how to format that artist resume. There's a sample resume linked there. We have a whole work samples guidelines page that I mentioned earlier, and some other tips for you. So take a look at that. We've put it together over time based on the feedback and questions we've gotten through the application processes. So it's pretty comprehensive. And then in the work sample section, this is what I was talking about before. You have two spots where you can upload files to the work samples. So you can only upload two. If you have more than two, you'll have to combine them maybe into one or two files. Or you can give us a link to take us to something like an image gallery or your SoundCloud account or your YouTube video, whatever the case may be. All right, moving right along. When you get to this section, Hannah was making a really great point about how you can add value to your application by providing evidence that if you're working with other artists, for example, show us that those artists know about the project and that they're on board, things along those lines. So there's a question that says provide a letter or email of invitation or acceptance. This is where, if it's something that you have to be formally accepted into, you could upload your email from the conference saying, yes, we want you to participate. But if you don't need to use the section for that, you can also use this section to upload things like a letter of support. So if you're working with a collaborator, you could get a letter from them saying, I'm really excited about this project. Here's what I'm planning to bring to it. All of that really helps to, again, build the panelists' confidence. And again, if you have more than one letter, that's great. Include all of them. You can only upload one file though, so you will have to combine all of those letters into one Word doc or a PDF. Okay, last thing. Once you have completed the application, you'll hit this save or save and return to dashboard to take you back to that home page. And there's one more step that I really, really encourage that you use. Before you can submit the application, it'll have this button that says final review and submit. And when you click on it, it gives you this little prompt that says you're going to have to click a checkbox somewhere. So you'll just say continue with review. And it's going to show you exactly what the panelists will see when they review your application. So don't skip this step. Go through the application. You'll be very familiar with it. Maybe this is a boring step, but this is where you can double and triple check to make sure that the things that you included as attachments in your supporting document are the right documents that you wanted to include. One of the most common mistakes that we see is in the budget area. A lot of times applicants will forget to save their actual numbers and they'll just upload a blank budget template that has no numbers in it. So you don't want to do that, but you can click on the document that you uploaded here and make sure it's the right one. And you can also go all the way to the bottom to see all of just the documents that have been attached if you want to check it that way. If everything looks good, you'll have to click a checkbox saying that you reviewed the application, you're happy with it, it says what you want it to say, and then you'll hit submit. Thank you so much for submitting, and then you'll get a little email confirmation that's just an automated message letting you know that it went through. And that, my friends, is all we have for the Artist Opportunity Grant. If you would entertain one more second here, we do have a separate opportunity that I just want to make sure that everyone in this room is aware of. Is it showing the NEA slide? Okay, great. So this is unrelated to the Artist Opportunity Grant, but it's very, very relevant to, I think, this audience. CultureWorks is a recipient of a National Endowment for the Arts Our Town grant. If you don't know that program, the Our Town program is a creative placemaking grant that supports activities that integrate arts, culture, and design into local efforts to strengthen communities. And so what CultureWorks is doing, it's called the Our Town Dayton Project, and we are partnering with the Edgemont Solar Garden on an artists professional training program. So that's going to be 30 emerging artists will be selected to work with 6 mentor artists to learn skills in business and community project development. The training will culminate in a capstone community developed artwork to be installed or performed at the Edgemont Solar Garden. So if you are an emerging artist who's interested in getting training, advice, and insight from other professional artists and being part of a collaborative community artwork, check out this opportunity. You do have to apply, and we're accepting applications now through December 15th, 2022. I'll drop the link to that application in the chat. And if you have any questions, I'm not the expert on that program, but you can reach out to that Our Town Dayton at cultureworks.org. So let me drop that into the chat for you. And while I'm doing that, if you have any questions or things that we did not cover, please feel free to send those our way. We know it is 1:03, so if you are really hungry or you've got stuff to get back to, I just want to thank you on behalf of CultureWorks and the MCACD for your time today. We really hope that we get to see an application from you. And as Hannah and I both mentioned, we're here to help. We want this to be a smooth and exciting process for you. So if you have questions at any point, don't be shy. We're here to help. And yeah, we look forward to learning more about what you're working on. So thank you so much. We'll hang out for just a few minutes to answer any questions, but otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.